Good morning, Deanne.
Good morning, Mr. Campbell.
You can call me Donald. I don't
No,
mind.
I can't.
Okay,
I can't.
okay. So how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm good. It's the top of the year, first week and all that. Maybe going
Indeed.
into second week now, second week. And then things are great. I'm just hoping that it's gonna carry on that way.
Absolutely.
So it was really good to have met you the other day and to be interviewed by you.
Thank
So
you.
the role is reversed. And I gotta congratulate you also on how good you were in your
Thank you.
interview
Thank
and
you.
all that. So again, thank you for participating in this venture, the Forgotten Generations project, where you've agreed to have some questions asked about your life story. I'm going to take it from there. All right.
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay,
Sounds
so I'm
well.
going to begin by asking you where you were born.
I was born in Birmingham, in Handsworth Wood, and yeah, I've been here my whole life essentially, except for
Wow.
university.
Wow. Oh, except for university. Oh, come on to
Yep.
that in a bit. So, are you an only child? Have you got other siblings?
No, I'm the oldest of two, so I've got a younger brother who is about 2 school years younger than me.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just the two of us. And then my mom has sisters and they all have children. So kind of been raised around my cousins. And my nan lived with us as well growing up. So my mom, my dad, my nan, my brother. That was our house.
Wow. Wow. And talking about mom and dad and that, were they born here as well?
Dad was born in Jamaica, mom was born here. So
Okay.
mom's parents came over in the 50s.
Right.
And then mom was born here, and then dad was born in Jamaica and came over later.
Wow. 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 So, being born in Jamaica, have you brother taken on that sort of culture, or have you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all my grandparents, bar one, retired back to Jamaica. So every summer we went to Jamaica growing up. So 6 weeks, well, anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks every single year was spent in Jamaica.
No.
Yep. So
Really?
I drive out there now. I know where I'm going. I go on my own. Yeah.
Oh my
Jamaica's like
goodness.
a second home for me.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Because
I'm so
this,
yeah, so fortunate that like mom and dad could, get us there every year as well. Because it's not a cheap flight, but they were able to
no,
do that. And it made the difference, I think.
absolutely, because that cultural sort of embrace
Yeah.
isn't just a theory, it's actually something that happened for real because you've actually done and spent so much time.
Yeah.
And where exactly is that in Jamaica?
So Granddad retired back to Runaway Bay, so on the north coast, nice beaches. And then my grandparents on the other side, they were in Christiana in like Manchester, so in the cooler part of Jamaica, which I didn't love, but it was still nice.
Yeah, and that's quite true, isn't it? Because a lot of
Yeah.
returnees go to the cooler part, which is Manchester,
Yeah.
because they find it so much less hot.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
I guess not everybody like that. They want the heat.
No, after you left England, you just want to like, defrost in the
Yeah,
hottest
yeah,
part possible
yeah, yeah. So what age did you start going back to Jamaica then?
from the womb. Literally,
Oh
I
my
think
God.
my first trip would have been about a few months old. And then it's been
Wow.
every year because my granddad pretty much moved just before I was born. So it was kind of a
Wow.
new thing, him being out there and everybody kind of going to him in the summer. So that kind of started a tradition of our summers.
Fantastic. And is that your brother as well?
Yeah, yeah, brother as well.
Wow.
Two of us.
I absolutely love that. Yeah. So we talk about schooling then. So you did
Sure.
your schooling here in England?
Yeah, all of it here.
Yeah. So where did you go to school?
So I went to a really nice little quiet Catholic primary school, and that was very nice. And they were very encouraging. I've been thinking about it a lot doing the research I'm doing about everybody else's school. And I realized how encouraging that school was. And I think between that and my family are all teachers. So my mom's a teacher, aunts, my nan was a teacher, whole family of teachers. There's no escaping, school on the weekend, school in the evening. I was able to get into grammar school. So I went to King Edward's Handsworth. And from there, yeah, just kind of went through the grammar school system for 7 years in an all-girls school, and then I went off to university in London. The
Wow,
plan.
grammar school. So
Yeah,
you are a bright one.
I try. I feel like you when you have a family of teachers,
Yes.
you really are encouraged educationally, and education's always been so important in my family. It's just like one of the most important things. So it's always been a priority.
Which is so good because it is important because once
Yeah.
you're educated, it cannot be taken away.
Yeah,
And it's so important going out in the community to, spread your wings, so to speak, being
absolutely.
educated, because you're going to face a lot. And once people realize that you are educated, because you are judged anyway, but
Right.
once people realize that you're educated, then that's a different subject. So King Edward's, I've heard of that. And so what was that like?
It was lovely. I think some people don't really like being in an all-girls school or a single-sex school. I had the
Mm,
best time. I thought they really kind of push this idea that just because you're a woman, you shouldn't be closing yourself off from any kind of professions. You shouldn't be shying away from things like sciences, like physics. And they always would tell us the statistics of, girls not taking up STEM subjects or girls not getting into things like engineering. And that wasn't an issue for us because everybody did everything and everybody was pushed into everything. So I really liked it there, and it was really close to my house, and I've got friends now from all over Birmingham, but it was kind of easy for me just popping in on the 16 to school and coming home every day.
um,
And yeah, I really, really enjoyed I had a great experience of school. I love school.
Fantastic. So, did you know what you wanted to do before you left school?
Um, I knew that I think university in our family is always the expectation. So all my cousins before me had gone. So it wasn't really a question of if I'd go. It was more like what would I do when I go there? Um, I really liked writing. I liked essay subjects, English, history. I got into economics a little bit when I got into A level. I knew I wasn't going to do anything scientific. That wasn't for me. So English and history was kind of the route I was going down. And my
Right.
teacher's advice was always, do find the balance of what you love and what you're good at. And so I kind of stuck with the English and history. And I think I was about maybe 16 and
Hmm.
I started getting into, I'd say, Black history specifically, but mostly African American history, looking at
Okay.
civil rights movement and slavery and things like that. And I thought, I think I want to be a historian. So I was looking at Black historians in Britain, and I remember specifically sitting at in this very room, sitting at my desk, Googling, how many Black professors or to find a Black historian to just see where they were. And at that point, I think it was about 2013 there wasn't a single Black female professor of history in Britain, and
Wow.
only now there's only one.
Wow.
And there's one man, Hakeem Addy, Professor Hakeem Addy, and then Professor Olivetta Tele for as a woman. And so you kind of thinking, well, actually, is there a reason people aren't doing this? Is there a ceiling that I'm going to hit that I'm not going to be able to get much further at a point? But also thinking, actually, if there isn't a role model, there wasn't one for me to look up to as a professor, then
Hmm.
maybe I need to kind of do that so
Like
that
that.
somebody else down the line doesn't have the same kind of issue that I had.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so I thought I'm going to go on this track of studying history, and I figured if I didn't like it at any point, the degree was wide enough that I could go into something else like teaching or law afterwards. But
Right.
for the time, I would do English and history, and that's what I chose at university to study.
Brilliant, brilliant. And let me just go back a little bit into King
Mhm.
Edward's because I've always heard of it as being a really good school, and you've said that. So, what about that sort of balance in terms of Black history? Was that addressed at all?
No, not at all. We didn't do any. I would say the only thing we did was the transatlantic slave trade. And personally, for me, I think I think it's very problematic that the only time as a Black person you're seeing yourself is shackled. I think that's
Mm,
totally unfair. I think it's a bit ridiculous, especially
mm,
when it's taught from the angle of empire being this great and wonderful thing,
mm,
and not actually, really critiquing some of the like violence and disgusting elements of it. But I did go to Saturday school growing up, and that is where I did Black history. So I went
oh,
to a Saturday school on Saturday. See, everything was school for me.
wow, wow.
And so yeah, I went to one. It was run by some of the ladies in the church I went to, and it was in a community center every Saturday morning. And all my cousins went as well, and like family friends. So it was kind of the cool thing to do. Everybody was going, so off
Yeah,
me and my
yeah.
brother went as well. And there I remember I had a Nigerian teacher, and another Jamaican teacher, and we did lots of Black history with them. And that's, I
Wow.
think that's probably, whilst that was when I was a lot younger in primary school, maybe like 9 or 10, I think some of that must have stuck with me, to be honest.
That's so important. That's so interesting as well that you've said that, because I don't know that there's everybody or a lot of people know how important that sort of Saturday school is,
Yeah,
because that's where you get that sort of level of information that is so needed,
yeah,
because it gives you a balance to your life in terms of, you just getting fed one thing, and then, maybe you hear about Black History Month, which is 1 month of the year. But to go into a school every Saturday or something like that and to get that balance, I think that's extremely important.
absolutely.
So coming back to your university then, so you decided to go to do university to do what?
So I was going to just do history, and then at the last minute, my English A level was a lot better than I expected. So I switched to join honors. Also because the history course, once I looked into it a little bit further, it was like majority European history. And I'd just done an A level of European history, and I was actually sick of it. Whereas the English modules, I could do Black British writers, I could do Caribbean writing. So I was like, actually, if I switch to half and half, I can get the kind of the Black history element within literature and poetry and things like that, and then do the history
Wow.
side as well. So it's
Wow.
very strategic. I got to the point where I was like, I've done everything school has told me to do. You know, you've played the game, you've done
Yes.
all the Russian Revolution, I've done all this like World War II history, Cold War history, but now I really want to do the history I want to do. So Queen
Wow.
Mary is the university I went to in East London, and they were one of the only universities that were kind of offering courses like this
Okay.
um, that I wanted to go to. So it was kind of a perfect fit in the end for me to go there.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned quite a few things there, including World War II history. Wow. How was that? Because that's quite a subject.
It
Um,
is. And I think now, and conversations we've had about World War II and the participation of Caribbean countries, especially Jamaica,
yeah,
by manpower and financially
yeah.
to World War II. If I just took what I learned at school about World War II, I wouldn't have known anybody but English people fought because, and white English people, I mean,
Mm,
we weren't taught about it at all. We looked at it, don't get me wrong, we weren't really looking at the social side of war. We were looking at the politics. So we were looking at what governments did and the decisions they
mm,
were making and the kind of
mm,
treaties between the European powers. So we weren't focusing too much on the people anyway. But
mm.
even so, the conversation about, what the Caribbean contributed, what Africa contributed, what India contributed, nothing, none of that.
Yeah, the whole of UK had, or whatever it was then, Britain, had such an influx of Commonwealth people who gave so much,
Right.
in whether it was money, whether it was just, goods, and for that not to be told, and in a large sense still not being told,
Mm,
it's like it's travesty in my opinion,
it
you know.
is.
And when you have young people like yourselves coming through, you really need to know the truth. And
Yeah.
all we're asking for is a balance. Tell
Yeah.
it like it is, so that people can learn both sides of history, whatever color you are, or creed, or country.
Mm.
And that's what we look for. So how was university for you?
It was good fun. It was a good time again. I was in London, so I've gone from Birmingham, which is a fairly big enough city, to an even bigger city. And I just had a great time. I think, oh, it's going to sound really nerdy, but basically, when you're at a university in London, you can access all the other University of London libraries. So I
Oh,
could go to like any library in in London and
fantastic.
use their resources. And so that was really helpful. And it meant that because I find that Caribbean history, it tends genuinely to be like this small section on a shelf. So
Mhm.
because I remember I'd literally have to search the catalogs of like all the University of London libraries, like UCL, King's, LSC, check all of them, and then go to that library to find the one specific book because all of them had such small collections. So as
Right, right.
a collective, you'd get everything you probably needed, but the sections are so small in each individual institution. Um, but I played a lot of netball at university. I was on the team. I love sports, love playing netball. So I kind of had a good balance, I think, of the academics and then the sport and the social side that comes with playing sport at university. It was
That's
nice.
fantastic, fantastic. So is that something that you carried on from school days then, sports,
Yeah, I've played netball since I was about 9.
right?
And yeah, still playing today. So I think I've been
Are you
playing.
really?
Yeah, yeah, still playing till this day.
And I didn't mean that in any way, like
No, no,
or
not at
something. But so what do you play at a particular level or anything like that, or is it
all.
just fun or what?
Not it's a At the moment I'm in a like a social league, so it's mostly people for after work people. It's a mixed league, so it's men and women. There's a referee, you just turn up and play in your team, and you kind of the teams rotate each week, so you play different teams.
So wait a minute. Did you say men and women?
Yep, it's a mixed league. Yep, men play net. There's men have national. Jamaica has a men's national netball team, and Australia have one. England have one.
Really?
Yep, it's a growing sport.
I've been
Definitely.
educated. Honestly,
Yeah.
I've never known that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So each team then have mixed male and
Um,
female?
Not
Right.
internationally, not at that level. At the higher levels, it's still just single sex, but
Right.
lower levels in kind of just social leagues, you'll get the mixed ones.
That's very interesting. Very,
Yeah.
very interesting. Wow. And that's like, so is that a sport that it's a Olympic sport, isn't it?
No, that's
Isn't
part
it?
of the issue because men typically haven't played it. It's not had an Olympic sport kind of call up. I think
Wow.
Australia have put a bid in for it to be considered for their Olympics, which I think is 2 Olympics time.
Wow.
So we kind of all got our fingers crossed because we don't get the biggest event for netball is like either the Commonwealth Games or the Netball World Cup. And
Wow.
because it is mostly, and I really want to do some more research on this as to why, but it is the Commonwealth countries that play netball.
Okay.
It's not really America, but it is all those countries that were colonized by Britain. So Jamaica,
Yes,
loads of
yes,
Caribbean, Trinidad have a team, Barbados, Jamaica, and then
yes, yes,
the
yes.
countries in Asia like Hong Kong, Singapore. So it'd be interesting to
Wow.
see kind of where that all began.
Wow. So have you played any other sports?
Yeah, well, I was very sporty as a young person, and
Mhm.
thankfully King Edward's had a lot of sports offerings. So I started playing football when that was my first sport, then
Oh,
basketball.
really?
Yep. I've played cricket. I was on the school
Oh,
team for cricket. Yep. Much to the pride of my granddad.
oh my God.
And I swam. I swam a lot when I was a child as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you must have been quite a popular person in terms of because you do so many different things,
Yeah.
the academic and sport. Wow.
I think the one thing about King Edward's is everybody's academic, so that becomes kind of null and void, if that makes
Oh,
sense, because
yes, yes, I get that.
everybody's so
Yeah.
it's more than there's the sporty girls or the musical people and the people that do drama. That becomes more of the thing as opposed to the academics, I think,
Yes,
in a
yes,
place
yes,
like
yes.
King Edward's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did you do at university?
I was there for 3 years. Yeah, 3 years in London.
And
And
were you tempted to live in the big smoke, or do you live in the big smoke?
well, fast forward, I'm there now.
Ah!
I came home for my master's and then I got a job in London after that. So I went to London. And I
Okay.
now do my PhD in London as well. So
Oh, that's
kind of back and
fantastic.
forth.
So talking about job then, what is
Yep.
it that you do?
Well, so when I left university, I did a master's and then I went into museum work. I was working as a curator and I did an oral history project at the Museum of
Oh,
Methodism. So I was working there, and it was a really nice project actually. They wanted to include more of the representation in the British Methodist Church. So I was looking at some of the leaders that came from a diverse background, whether they were from Africa, the Caribbean, or Asia, and then interviewing them for them to tell me their stories. And then we created an exhibition with the museum staff to include them into that history,
wow.
which was really that was really fun. I did enjoy that job.
So you said did. So how long did you do that for?
Yeah. So that was they just wanted to get that exhibition done. So it was like a year contract. So I was there for a year. And then I started my PhD. So my work is now my PhD, and that is me full
Wow,
time.
wow, wow, wow. So why did you, I think you probably mentioned already, but why did you select what you do now for your PhD?
I think one thing with academia is you kind of have to find something that no one's done much work on to justify funding and justify why you should be the person to do it. And I felt like I wanted to look at, I like migration. I love looking at people moving countries for whatever reason, whether they be they're adults or children. And I felt like the kind of the thing that made sense was migration from the Caribbean to Britain. It's what I did my master's on, but I looked at women only. And so in the PhD, I was kind of looking at the gaps in this kind of, I guess, what we call this Windrush narrative,
Mm,
people arriving after World War II from the Caribbean. And I felt like children were kind of left out of the narrative a little bit. We don't really focus too much on them. We tend to focus on adults and their
mm,
contribution and, you know,
mm.
them coming for jobs and better lives or on invitation. But actually children that just get uprooted. And when you're told as a child you're moving, you don't have any say. You know, you kind of have to accept it or you don't, but you're going anyway. So I
Yes,
wanted to, yeah,
I
so
fully
look at what I
understand.
meant. Of course. Yeah.
Wow, that's very very interesting because as you know, the Forgotten Generation looks into that very
Yeah.
very much, and there are so many stories out there to be told, and it's so interlinked with you leaving, being left behind, moving here, meeting people who were born here, and
Mm.
even the other way around. There are children that actually were born here and actually migrate to the Caribbean because they think it's a better education system, all that
Yes.
sort of thing. So there's a mixture of all that there. One of the things that I ask people about is being born here. How do they see themselves? You know, do you see yourself as an English person, a British person, a Jamaican, or or a Trinidadian, or whatever, or a mixture of everything? How do you see yourself?
Um, Maybe controversially, and I definitely can take the opposing side as well. But
Mm.
growing up, I don't know why it is. Maybe I maybe I read too much, but I've never seen myself as British. And I know I am. I passport, by upbringing, by education, in all ways, I'm British, but I just never see myself as that. I think it's partly because of the legacy of what I think it means to be British sometimes. I think
Okay.
it in my head it's quite negative. Empire, colonization. I find it difficult to identify with that. And I know I don't think I have to. I think there is a more of a claim for an identity wrapped around being Black British. And I think I can see myself more in that, but I think I also always probably call myself like British born Jamaican, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
I just happen to
absolutely.
be born here, but really I'm Jamaican. Yeah.
I fully understand that, and you really touch on something there because there are quite a few people who've been offered honors,
Mm,
MBE, OB, and that sort of thing, who have turned it down
yeah.
because of something that you touched on there, the colonization. And I mean, you know, everybody's got their own opinion as to
Yeah.
whether or not they would accept that sort of thing, you know. And they've also looked at, and also not just looked at it, but they've given their reason why they've turned it down. And they
Yeah.
would have accepted it if they take the bit off the end, you know, MBE,
Yeah.
Empire, just
Absolutely.
change that ending, you know, and a lot of people would accept it because if you've earned it just like anybody else, then obviously it's something that you should have because it's not just you as a person, it's whoever you're surrounded with that can get the benefit of that as well.
Mm.
So I'm just hoping one day they may look at this and change it, but I'm not going to hold my breath right now.
No, no. I do think they need to though. It,
Yes, yes,
no, it doesn't, yeah. Yeah, no.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you do get a lot of people who are like yourself, very sort of cultural conscious of your heritage, you
Mm.
know, and want to embrace that. Not that you don't want to embrace where you were born and what it stands for, but you want a fairer society and
Yeah,
a society that reflects the whole thing a lot better. Wow.
absolutely.
Wow. So job wise, then once you finish, how long have you got to do before you finish your
The big question. I think I'll probably have about 2 more years of this.
okay.
Maybe yeah, 2025, 26. So
Oh
yeah, two
yeah,
more years or so.
right. And what do you plan on doing after that?
Hopefully I'll become a lecturer.
Oh,
I'd like to continue teaching people about history and write my own modules so that I can, so some of the children of the future can do what I wanted to do.
I
That's
can
the
see that, you
plan.
know.
Thank you.
I can honestly, I can even feel that because you're so comfortable in all of this, and I can see you being right up there and actually representing one of those people that you didn't have when you were young. You
Thank you.
know, yeah, I really can see
Thank
that,
you.
and I wish you the best in that. Have you traveled much?
Yes. I
All
have.
right. So
Yeah.
where are some of the countries that you've been to then?
Well, going back to the netball, so we do follow the World Cup, me and my friends. So it was in Liverpool 4 years ago, and this year it was in South Africa. So we went to South Africa to follow the netball, and it was a very interesting trip. The netball was incredible, and Jamaica did really well.
Yes,
We were
yes,
cheering, yeah, we were cheering them on.
yes.
We were at all their games, and there weren't many Jamaicans there, so we had all our flags and everything. It was great. But then obviously looking into the history of South Africa and of apartheid, we went to Robben Island where Nelson Mandela was held and did a lot of the tours, and we're kind of thinking about, what the country looks like now, so many years after apartheid. And I think it's quite disappointing, even though, apartheid's ended and on paper there's equality, but in reality there's a lot of inequality. So seeing that was quite
Sorry,
stark.
can I pause you there?
Of
We
course.
had a little we had a little bit of a break. So you were saying something about Nelson Mandela, and
Oh,
then
okay.
for
Yeah.
some reason we had a little bit of an internet problem.
Oh, no worries. Let me go again then. So,
Yeah.
so the netball part of it was wonderful, and we were, cheering Jamaica on. But then we kind of started looking at some of the history, of course, of South Africa with apartheid, and we went to Robben Island, which is the prison that Nelson Mandela was
Yes.
held in. Yeah, and I think it was there that I don't know. It's a really sad place. I didn't expect it to be a nice place, but so they have tour guides and they give tours obviously about 3 times a day, and you have to take a ferry to the island.
Mm.
And the tour guide, he's an ex-political prisoner and would have been there around the same time as Nelson Mandela. And well, my question was, why is this man, who was held here for, I think he was there for like 9 years, the man we had, of his life, unjustly. Why is he now taking tourists around 3 times a day? And it was because when he was, released from prison in the 90s, he wasn't able to get work, even though he had his degrees, had his qualifications, nobody would hire him. And I think we kind of maybe we look at the end of apartheid as this big celebration. Okay, yes, it was amazing on paper, there's inequalities ending. But actually the real life ramifications for these people, meaning what,
Mm.
like 30 years later, he's still in prison, essentially, doing these tours. It was heartbreaking. And I kind of maybe because I've done this history and I've done the reading, when you go to these places, it's then hard to kind of see it in a positive light. You're kind of looking at
Mm.
the negatives. I'm looking at the fact
Mm.
that, it seems like a lot of the black people are um in poor conditions, working in
Mm.
service jobs. Their managers are all white, and you
Mm.
can see it in it.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes, yeah. Interestingly, obviously, done some work before you went to Robben Island. I just wonder what it was like to actually be there and see it, because when we read books and learn about things, you get a mental image,
yeah.
don't you, of what that place is like or not like. Was it anything like what you thought it would be?
Um, No, I thought it would be, I don't know, in my head, a prison on an island. I
Mm.
just thought there would be like one prison building on this very small island. It's a lot bigger than I thought it would be. And there's like a town as well, like a church, they had houses.
Oh,
It
really?
was, it was, yeah, it was more than just the prison. There's like kind of two halves to it, I guess. There's like a village and then the prison. And then the prison has lots of blocks. So it was
Mm.
actually a really big, expansive space. Like once we got off the ferry, we had to get a coach to the prison. So it's still a good
Okay.
like 20-minute drive in. It's quite a sizable island. The prison itself, I think, was what I expected. They haven't done much to it, of course. It's very like, basic, um, dull, drab, just a lot of metal bars and kind of what you would expect in that sense. But it was a beautiful sunny day, and I always find when you go to these places, you kind of want it to be doomy and gloomy so you can really get into the emotion of it. But it was a beautiful day. Sun was shining, it was cool, but it was nice, and kind of the contrast of the weather and the kind of,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
So,
happiness of sun with actually the reality.
wow. So were you able to do any recording of like, photos and anything like that? So you were allowed.
Yeah, The tour guide was happy to be recorded. So I have some recordings of him speaking about his experience, which is quite an invaluable one, actually, hearing someone that was actually there
Yeah,
tell you,
yeah.
like, I slept on the floor here, or we
Ah,
showered over there, and this is where we were, breaking stones for our manual labor for the day. So we
ah,
have that, and they have obviously pictures around the place as well. And they haven't, as I said, they haven't done much with it. They haven't made it into like a museum or anything like that, which I think is really important. It kind of sits as it was, just very stark.
right.
Yeah.
Can I just say that we have an internet problems?
Oh no.
So this is just gonna be a historic thing. We have a last time we spoke there was no problem, but there seems to be a
No.
problem today. It's probably the weather. So you
Oh,
just
okay.
keep going in and out, but we carry on anyway.
Or
Yeah.
sometimes when you get the recording, it's all right. Because on mine, we're not going in and out. So
Uh,
maybe it just might be
well,
fingers
yes.
crossed.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. So where else have you been then,
Oh,
country-wise?
trying to think of the interesting ones. In terms of the Caribbean, I've only actually ever been to Jamaica. I do want to change that because I think it would be good to see the rest of the Caribbean too.
I'll endorse that. It
Okay,
is.
brilliant.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Where do you recommend?
Well, definitely St. Kitts,
Oh,
right?
that's on my
Very,
list. Yeah. Wow.
very, very modern
Yeah.
and historical because
Yeah.
that's the first. I think it's the first place that slaves went to
Mm,
from wherever
yeah.
in terms of the Caribbean, and I think it's definitely a big historic thing with the British and St. Kitts as one of
Brilliant.
the first place they went to, and the people are extremely friendly and very much Jamaican oriented. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. And then just traveling around, it's very very nice. And then you've got the other islands of Barbados and all those
Yeah.
places. Well, definitely worth seeing. So any one of them, to be honest with you,
Okay, brilliant.
yeah,
They're
recommend it.
all on
So
my list.
yeah, 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 yeah. So where else in the
Oh, where else have I been? If I want to keep it historical, another place I went to, which I was kind of comparing Robben Island to, is I've been to Poland and I went to Auschwitz.
really?
Yeah, I went when I was in school actually. That was another good thing about King Edward's. Yeah, very keen to get us into the kind of historical things that we were interested in. And I went with the Holocaust Education Trust. So we had like a session before where we met a survivor and they told us their story. And then a few weeks later we went to Auschwitz. And again, it was that feeling of you're in such a place where such atrocities have taken place and you're trying to kind of reckon with all the emotions of it, whilst also being respectful to the lives that were lost there and their stories. Um,
Wow.
yeah, that was
What
a
what,
trip.
sorry, was that a really heady thing?
Yeah.
Like when you enter the place and probably sort of went into a room or whatever, how was it mentally? Did you feel
It
it?
was really tough. Thankfully we had sessions where we were like prepped before. Like we kind of knew, obviously you're not going into this, it's not going to be a happy place. But honestly, I don't think I've cried as much ever again.
Is that
Like
right?
it really because so there's a room and I'll never forget this room. Like I went nearly 10 years ago and I can tell you it today as if it was yesterday, where when they would get people would be admitted to Auschwitz, they'd shave their head.
Hmm?
And there was a room that was full of hair, like a kind of exhibit.
When you say people, sorry, is that regardless of male or female?
Yeah, male or female, all of them. Because they have obviously had like things like lice would spread because they weren't
Oh, okay,
able to
okay.
access hygiene. They
Oh,
weren't really
right,
able
right, right,
to
right, right.
shower, so that yeah, they would shave their head to stop stuff like that spreading. And it was a room and it was like kind of a glass partition and it was just full of hair. And then
No.
I just thought, wow, like wow. Do you know what I mean? Like they
I
just
mean,
stripped you of everything.
were you aware of that before you saw it? Did you know that
Um,
existed?
I don't remember. Maybe not. I think I knew that they shaved people's heads because in the pictures when you see people in the Holocaust they tend to have like no hair. So I imagine
Right,
hair must have gone somewhere. But
right.
actually for them to just have it there. And the thing that got me, and this is I did know this was gonna be there and I didn't think I would react the way I did, but all of their house keys, because these people thought they were going home. And it just, I think at that moment, I was like, these people thought, this is going to be a horrible few weeks, few months, the Nazis are in control. they locked their doors when they left, and they went with their
Wow.
house keys, and there was just a wall of house keys hung up because they
No.
thought they would go back at some point, and a lot of them never did because they died there. They were murdered.
Oh
So
my.
it's all of these little things, and their shoes, and you're seeing like baby shoes, and it more so than I'd say Robben Island. Obviously, they were both horrific places, but in different ways. That was kind of gut-wrenching. Like I
Wow.
remember getting home, and I remember I ran straight to my nan. I was like, I just need to give you a hug because I just
Oh my
like
goodness.
you just feel so grateful that that wasn't, you know, you.
And and the thing about traveling, it broadens the mind so much, doesn't it?
So much.
I mean,
So much.
for you to take in some of the things that you've seen there, you're never the same once you
No.
actually been to these places. And even just going down the town, say in wherever you are in South Africa and mixing with the people,
Yeah.
and going to Germany and mixing with the people, wherever you go, it's just that cultural education that I call it going to the University of Life.
I like that.
That's how I see that. But one of the things that we did talk about in your interviewing me was the ATS.
Yes.
And that must have been a point of interest as well in going into that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, of course. So I did my master's at the University of Birmingham. I came home and I wanted to look at migration. And when I went to the Black Cultural Archives in Brixton to look at the archives there. And I kind of just wanted to see what maybe I could do the master's dissertation on. And I just found loads of stuff about Black women, Caribbean women specifically in World War II in the ATS, the Auxiliary Territorial Service. And at that point, I knew that men served. I knew they were in the RAF. I knew they were in the armed forces. I knew about the West Indian Regiment, but I did not know. I knew they must have, but I did not have an example of Black women in service, in armed service, in any kind of way. All the only thing I knew about was in factories, kind of on the front lines, that kind of thing. Not the
Mm.
front line, sorry, on the home front. That's the one.
Mm.
And the kind of things that you get taught at school about women, making ammunition and things like that.
Yes.
And I got there, and then I found the story of Connie Marks, who was in the Auxiliary Territorial Service and based in Jamaica as a medical secretary. And I
Mm.
read about her story, and then I found a book called, I think it was called Caribbean Women at War, by Ben Busquet and someone Douglas. I can't remember the first name. But it was an incredible book, and I read it, like absorbed it, devoured it, and it was all about women in the ATS. And I thought, instead of just looking at post-war migration of women, I'm going to move my dates to about 1939 and then look at the migration of Caribbean women in Britain for the ATS specifically as my first chapter. And so I was able to do that. I wasn't able to interview anyone that would have been in the ATS because I think by now most of them would probably have passed away.
Yes.
But the Black Cultural Archives do have a lot of recordings interviewing people within the ATS, so they're available. And then within that book as well, there were interviews too. So I was able to kind of use a secondary reading to build up
Wow.
my source base.
Wow. That's fantastic. Can I tell you about Ina Collymore Woodstock? I don't know if you've heard of her.
I wrote about her.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Because she will be 107 this year in September,
Wow. Oh,
and
she's still alive. Wow.
yes, I interviewed her twice.
Oh,
Uh,
incredible.
when I say interviewed, I had her and two other World War II veterans on a Zoom at the same time, and she
Wow.
lives in Barbados. And I was actually invited to her 106th birthday for
Wow.
September, you know, via Zoom, not actually to Barbados, and that was fantastic because she had all her family there as well, and they were all sort of in the lawyer solicitor world like she was. She's incredible story. Well, the story is absolutely incredible. So when you mention about women of the past doing that kind of service, she's one of the stalwarts and still with us.
I know, it's incredible.
And have to be got to be the oldest British veteran alive female. Got to be.
Yeah.
So it
Wow.
was fantastic. So the subjects that you've touched on, not only going to King Endowments, but the actual subjects that you've gone through so far I find fascinating. It's
Thank
such a
you.
learning that's taken place. It's a fantastic grounding for your future plan to become an educator yourself,
Thank
you
you.
know. And
Yeah.
he's such an example to other young Black individuals, because, you know, girls and boys will look at your stories. And that's the point about the forgotten generations, to interview people like yourself and put it out there, so that when I go to schools and do talks or wherever I go to, I can say, watch Deanna
Thank you.
and listen to her story. But we need more people like yourselves,
Yeah.
you know.
I
And we
will
talk,
say,
you
I
go
will
on,
say, sorry to cut you.
no
There are
problem.
there are so many more now, especially
Yes.
doing PhDs.
Mm,
Black Caribbean students doing
mm,
PhDs in Black history. Some of
mm,
them are going back as early as like the Tudors and the 15th, 16th century and looking at the
mm,
Black presence of people in Britain as early as that. Some of them
mm.
are looking at more modern history and topics relating to politics and social work and nursing and everything. And it is, I think, when I first started out on this journey, you didn't really know if anybody else was doing similar things, but
Mm,
there are so many other young people dotted around the country. We don't tend to get to be in the same institution,
no,
unfortunately,
no, no,
doing
no.
doing these histories, which it is wonderful. And I hope that, it will change things for those growing up in the
I,
future, that they'll be able to do some Black history at school.
yes, indeed, and on a permanent basis, because that's one of the it's part of the ethos of the Forgotten Generation, is that
Yeah.
we will promote Black history to be in the curriculum on a permanent basis. You
Mm.
know,
Yep.
and it has to happen. And you're right. I have been contacted by other people at university doing some sort of historical thing like yourself there. And one of the things that I was interviewed about recently last year was looking at the psychological side, because there's this young lady like yourself, and she will be graduating this year, I think. She's doing
Oh,
her
nice.
doctorate, looking at the psychological impact on being born in the Caribbean and coming here, and whether or not it's as a child or an adult, you know, what impact has that had?
Yeah,
And it's amazing the impact that's taken. So we want
definitely.
certainly a lot more like yourself. Would you say there are quite a few male doing this as well as female, or is it just mainly female?
It's really funny. I was actually having this conversation with someone just this weekend, because I'm in a few history groups. There's one called the Young Historians Project, that do similar work, and I have a podcast, the History Hotline. And I was looking at on Instagram, you can kind of see who follows your page by demographic. And for the podcast, the breakdown is about 82% women and 18% men. And it
Wow.
was the same for the other history page. It was about 70% women and 30% men. And it seems to be the case that, especially within these demographics being Black boys, they aren't taking up Black history in the same way that the girls are having an interest. And that's not to say everyone needs to do history degrees or
No, no,
do
no.
PhDs, but even just to follow a history page on Instagram, or get a bit of extra information through a podcast, then it's not happening. Um,
Yes,
I think
yes.
data has shown that history is the third least popular subject at A level for Black and ethnic minority students. And I think that has everything to do with the fact that Black children don't see themselves in history and don't want to study something that, makes them feel inferior, things like slavery. So it's like until I think the curriculum changes, I don't think we'll see society change, but it definitely is a gender imbalance when it comes to the study of history.
That's very, very interesting.
Mm,
And if I can just switch this subject slightly
of
to the
course.
armed forces, we do have a problem there as well, in terms of um, Black youngsters, especially the ones that actually live or born and live here,
Yeah.
joining the armed forces. There seems to be something mental that it's not my army, it's not my navy, it's not my air force.
Mm,
And when I get asked that question, I say to them, we do live here. We're intertwined in the fabric of this land. So therefore, whatever the post is, from sweeping the street right up to premiership, to being a prime minister, we should be looking at taking on that mantle, that role, if we can, if we have that ability. So whoever wants to do what, and that's my answer to a lot of people who think the armed forces is not for us. And it's interesting that you say that the history there is just mainly women. I think we need to start. I mean, I do know of some people, a doctor at the University of Birmingham City, who is doing history and all that sort of thing. But I don't think it's enough. I think there needs to be a better balance.
Yeah, definitely.
In my opinion, and right across the board in all the different facets of life. You know, the environment, people in the environment looking at themselves, and then we look at the political side of things as well. You know, the different strata of, you know, being a councillor, being an MP, and all these different things. I don't suppose you ever thought about yourself as a political person, do you?
Maybe from my hesitation. You know what? I think in an ideal world, I would just love to just get some curriculum change going. And if I need to go and get into policy or something to do that, then I will. But I think the way that political parties are set up at the moment, I don't think I could see myself in either one of them. To actually stand and, you know, represent that party, I'd struggle right now. Maybe things will change in the next 10 or 15 years. I'm sure they will, but I don't know if there's a political party I can really get behind at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'll happily vote to get rid of the Conservative Party because, sorry, just got to say it, they've got to go. But yeah, I'd right now to actually, you know, to be a member of that party, I'd struggle, I think.
Yeah.
But I think you can be, you know, there's other ways to get, I think, have a political influence without necessarily being an MP, let's say. Could be, you know, other ways.
And then the point I'm making is that whatever part of the fabric of life that exists, we should be making sure, once we have that interest, that we're there.
Yeah.
Because we need to be at the table.
Yes, definitely. I do agree.
If you're not at the table, you cannot influence change.
Yeah.
You know, and what a lot of people do is talk about it. Why aren't we doing this one? When there's no one at the table saying that we needs to be represented. So the decisions are made without us. And later on, we see ourselves down the road having to be picking up the pieces. That's really the point I'm making. You know,
absolutely.
There's a good way to go, because when you look at the percentage of us, and I'm not making as an excuses in comparison to the big wide world, we were very small as a percentage. You know, but we're still quite loud.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what does the future hold for you then, in terms of traveling? You've done a lot already, and ultimately, you know, work-wise.
Well, I think primarily I just really like educating people on these topics. So, you know, further promoting the podcast and getting that out there and making sure, you know, if people do want to learn, that there is a space for them to learn. And hopefully, well, actually, no, I definitely need to finish the PhD, graduate, get the doctorate, and then hopefully become a lecturer at an institution and you know, be able to kind of get those modules going that I would have liked to have seen. And I think the be all and end all is that, you know, I think we all want to see more diverse histories in schools, and that doesn't just mean Black history. I think there's a call for it. We're in a more globalized world. People are moving around a lot more. There's a call for actually a more diverse curriculum across the board in schools in England. So I would like to see that, and we'll continue to educate people, you know, outside of the classroom until it's a reality inside the classroom, I think.
I love the idea of you having a podcast. What is it called?
The History Hotline.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been going for 3 years now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 3 years. I started in 2020 in August. So we are, I think 129 episodes in.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, 129. So it used to be a weekly podcast. I think we're going to go down to a fortnightly podcast, just because it's extremely demanding, and I think balancing that with a PhD is quite a lot.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I think that's where my kind of wide spanning interests come from, because from week to week I jump from, I don't know, whether it be the ATS or something like that, to somebody like I don't know, someone in politics, to the first Black whoever who's done X, Y, or Z. So Yeah, a lot of jumping around, which means that I think there should be something for everyone on the podcast.
Which is brilliant, really, because I mean, I don't know, it sounds as if it's kind of a difficult thing to stick to any particular whatever, because the subjects are so interesting, then you just jump from one to the next, right?
Yeah,
How do you
exactly.
manage that? Do you sort of do a podcast saying, right, okay, today we're going to talk about this particular subject or these subjects?
Yeah.
Is that how you do it?
Yeah, I tend to sometimes in this kind of interest of, what I'm researching academically, I'll bring
Mm.
that to the podcast. So
Okay.
when I was kind of formulating my PhD, I did an episode on the colonial curriculum in the Caribbean, just to kind of,
What
because
was that?
sorry, the British colonial curriculum in the
Okay.
Caribbean. So,
Okay.
what it looked like when people,
Yeah.
well, people like yourselves were learning all about Britain and not much else, even
Yeah.
though you're in the Caribbean. So what I'm doing academically, I tend to bring into the podcast, or sometimes
Okay.
people request episodes. Sometimes I'll have guests on that are doing history in other areas, so that I don't have to then do the research myself, but I can bring them on and they can talk about their research because they're the expert. Why would I then try and talk over
Yeah.
what they know? But yeah, just having guests on and lots of people that are doing different kinds of things.
We're
Just
talking about guests then. How do you get your candidate, so to speak, the guest?
Oh, sometimes people recommend people and say, "Oh, have you met this person?" Also going to like history conferences, you
Uh,
tend to meet academics and things like that. But
uh,
actually, I think as I'm moving into the next year, new year, and thinking about, what I want for the future of it, I really do want more people. So I'm talking about quite recent histories, like
mm,
yourself, you've moved over here. And you've been, been in the RAF, you're in the RAF for 36 years.
yes.
That's a story that I'd love to have on the podcast. So actually, this is me asking you. So on your own
Oh,
platform,
thank you very much.
if you wouldn't mind being on, but bringing these stories to life, because I think it's a lot easier to hear the history from the mouth of the person that experienced it, and it's invaluable. I can tell you everything I know about Black people in the RAF, but actually
Mm,
here we've got you. Why
mm,
would I speak on that when we have someone here that
mm.
can talk about it, if that makes sense?
It makes a lot of sense, because that's why when I started the Forgotten Generations, one of the unique points about it is actually live interview, like with yourself. It's your own words.
Yeah.
It's your face, you know, female of Black persuasion, So somebody looking at you, it's not the same as reading a book,
No.
right? Where you can change the words in the book and all these sort of things. It's you telling your story. So yeah, when you do interview the individual that's actually alive, that's had that live experience, going to South Africa and talking to that man who was in the actual prison himself,
Yeah,
invaluable.
absolutely.
It makes it so much more real. And I think it's great. And I love the idea of the podcast. Because we have a podcast about the forgotten generations. Almost every day I get up and I said, I must resurrect that,
Yeah,
because
you should.
I find it so interesting. And I started it off with military people.
Yep.
And when we start talking about our time in the forces, people, it's like nonstop. People just want to
Yeah,
talk and
of
talk and
course.
talk,
Yeah.
and I think it's great. So when I resurrect it, I'll do likewise. I'll accept your invitation for
Thank you.
yours, and I'll ask you to come
Brilliant.
up and talk
Sounds
about the
good.
academic side of life and your learning. And there's always so much more to talk about, isn't it?
Yep, of course. There
In
is.
terms of wide subject, and what we do in what we do is wake people up to certain things that they may have thought of, or they may not even have thought of,
Yeah.
because I didn't know that you'd done something in the ATS, the Auxiliary Territorial Service, and it's something that is also a big part of the Forgotten Generations, and I'd like to know more about it myself, things
Yeah.
like that. So I think it's fantastic. Have you got any questions for me, us, the Forgotten Generations, or anything like
I think, well, I've come from the position of having interviewed you last week for my PhD, so I've
that?
asked a lot of questions. And
Yeah,
actually, will say I finished your book yesterday. I really enjoyed it. I literally read it in like 2 days, so
yes, 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 yes.
already
Thank
brilliant. No, it was brilliant.
you.
And it really fleshed out so if you're listening and you don't know, I interviewed Mr. Campbell about his experience migrating from the Caribbean to Britain as a child, and his book actually kind of in detail goes into some of those experiences. I love the story when you rode your bike to Leicester and then the tire punctured on the way back. And after all that, then the bike got stolen anyway. Oh, I felt for you. I really did. I really, really did.
And do you know, that same individual, my friend,
Yeah.
who we met at 13, we
Yeah.
speak regularly. He lives in California, as I probably mentioned to you, right? And 2 days ago, we catch up regularly, right?
Yeah.
And we blame each other as to whose idea it was.
Oh, it's incredible. You know what? I think kids these days, like, they miss that spirit of just adventure and just doing something silly, like riding your bike how many hundreds of miles or tens of miles. Just it just, whenever I think one thing about reading about, you know, your generation and my parents' generation, it's the kind of that adventurous spirit that they seem to have, and playing out, running around, and you know, so active. And now it's just computer screens and tablets and
and when we talk, we flesh out so many different things, you know. And as I said to you, that his mom's still alive. She'll be 101 next month.
Wow.
101. And I think I'll go and visit her probably just today or something, like, because I see her and she still remembers. I walk in and she just says, "Oh, hello, Donald, how are you?" Know, 100, which is just fantastic, you know. And the other thing, that friend of mine is actually married to one of those girls that we went to visit.
No. So it all worked out, you know.
Yeah, absolutely great. Absolutely great. So this has been absolutely fabulous, you know, and I love it. And I just have to applaud you and what you're doing, because you fit into that so well. And however we can work together. And thank you for becoming a member of the Forgotten Generations, right? And we'll certainly keep in touch, definitely. You know, and just please let me know about the podcast. And
I will, definitely. And thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't actually ask you a question, but what's the kind of 2024 plan for the Forgotten Generations? What kind of things are you hoping to do and to think about more?
Okay, so the Forgotten Generations there's so many different elements to it. We are planning an upgrade of our website, and on that website we're going to have a virtual museum. So that virtual museum is going to be hopefully captivating in terms of, I'll give you an example. I've just had some information coming to me where someone served in the Merchant Navy. He was born in he was born in St. Lucia, and he actually served during the war in the Merchant Navy. Now you have the three armed forces, Navy, Army, Air Force, and you have the Merchant Navy that supply the goods and people to the armed forces. Now he was blown up on 3 different ships, torpedoed on 3 different ships. And survived and came to Birmingham to live and had 7 kids, 2 streets away from where I grew up.
Wow.
And this is his daughter that I met that's telling the story.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So she's just yesterday even sent me all this information about her dad, actually written down. So we want history like those to be available to people, to say that we too have served, and we've given some of us the ultimate, you know, our lives. But there are others who got such rich history to be told to us, to say that we belong. And I love the story about the ATS as well that you've actually gone in and talked about. And then we've got, throughout the year, we do have different dates. Like we actually celebrate the life of Herbert Morris, who was, you know, a part of the British West Indies Regiment and executed for desertion, which he was pardoned. You know, 306 of them were pardoned. So we go to the National Memorial Arboretum annually. And I'd love to invite younger people like yourself to come along if possible, to actually celebrate the life of that or those people. So we have different dates in the diary of different things that we'll promote as a part. And you remember now, So promote that so that people can come along and support and learn.
Brilliant.
And that's what it's all about.
Sounds
All right.
good. It's wonderful. Yeah.
This has been fabulous. Any
Thank
other
you
questions?
so much. No, I think that's me. That's everything I had that was wondering anyway.
Superb. And thank you for everything you're doing and
No
whatever you
worries.
plan in the
Thank
future.
you.
Good luck to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you.